Chosen the foolish things of this world over the wise things. He's chosen the poor over the rich. God has chosen to reveal these things to babes and not the wise. But one thing we have to do is stay motivated. And that's one of the reasons I love seeing this book every year, because this is the 7th edition. I remember some 7-8 years ago, Mr. Anderson saying, hey, if we put this book together, we'll have a good history of our church. And that's pretty true, isn't it? You want to see who the members were. You want to see who the baptisms were. You want to see what the events were. You can just flip through this and you'll see week after week. The other day I got to go to my old college and I saw one of my professors there. And we were talking about ministry and talking about things. And I remember sitting in his class 22 years ago. And I remember daydreaming about starting a church and daydreaming about getting to preach. And I remember back then, man, I was fired up about Jesus. I was excited. I had that fervor. And as we were talking, he goes, man, you're on fire, aren't you? And I go, yeah, I sure am. I said, you got to check out our newsletter book, man. It's coming out. We got baptisms coming in another week. And we got 3 services. You got 3 services going on? Oh, man, I love each and every one. Man, we got a basketball league. And he goes, man, I got to hang out with you more. And I was thinking, man, I got more fire now than I had when I was in college. Yeah. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? What did it say in Leviticus? That you never let that fire go out. What does it say in Romans? It says, don't let that zeal get put out. In 1st and 2nd Timothy, we fan that flame. And this is what God wants us to do. He wants us to fan the uniqueness that He's called us to. Job says, I'll take the choice guys. I'll take the unique guys. And then you take the rest of them. But we're going to head into battle, and we're going to be placed over here. And you guys are going to be placed over there. Some people will say Phil Jackson's the greatest basketball coach. I don't think that's really true. Maybe. Phil Jackson did have a guy named Michael Jordan, the greatest player of all time. He did have Scottie Pippen. He did have Shaquille O'Neal. He did have some guy named Kobe something or other. No, I'm teasing you like your fans. He had Kobe Bryant. He had great teams. So when you win with a great team, it's not, you don't need a great coach to win with great players. Anybody can coach. Roll the ball out. But there's another coach by the name of Greg Popovich, and many will say he's the greatest coach. And the reason you can say that is because many times in the Vegas line, Greg Popovich's team were not favored to win. They were supposed to lose. More people would bet on the other team. And he won more games as the underdog than any other coach in NBA history. And so you think, well, wait a second. Maybe he's the best coach because he places his players in the right places. Not many of us are mighty. Not many of us are rich. Not many of us are famous or well known, but how many of us know God's got a placement for each of us? Amen. Remember Esther? And what does Esther say? For such a time as this, that God has called me to these things. Lastly, it's the reinforcements that win the game. In 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 24, David and his wife and children, all of his families of his men have been kidnapped by the Amalekites. And so he goes to pursue them. And many of his men are so exhausted, they got to sit down. And David says, look, they're just over this ridge. Let's go fight them. And half the guys almost want to stay and rest a little bit. But David says, let's go. And David and a couple hundred men, they attack the Amalekites. They win the battle. They rescue all the wives, all the children. And the Amalekites had been raiding. And so they had all this loot. And the warriors that went and fought, they said, hey, you guys that rested, you can have your wives back. You can have your children back. But you're not getting any of the gold and silver that we just won. We're bleeding. You're napping. This is not even. And they started arguing. And then David laid down the law. From now on, here's the rule. The ones that stay and the ones that go, we all share it all. They did their part by watching the stuff. You did your part by fighting the battle. We're all going to share now. You know, God has got a calling on each and every one of us. Some have to go overseas and be the missionary. Some of us have to give generously so that they can go and they can be funded. Well, one teaches, one preaches, one does evangelism. We all have work, but we all need to always be staying ready. Look at that Matthew chapter 25.